And then there's no need to be shy. You can speak up. None of you have anything to say. Okay. Mm, uh, whenever you join, I won't be. This semester, I'm not teaching anything. So, but in future, I hope you will. I'll teach you some courses. Let's see. Uh, Lalit, can I start? Lalit? Okay. So let's. I will share the screen. I will share some slides. But before we um, start talking about this topic, let's try to get a sense of what economists actually do. So before I state my version of it, I would like to hear some ideas from you. What is your idea that economists do? So Ahili, Mehak, anyone, any ideas would do. I don't expect you to come up with very good answers because you have not been trained yet. But it's better for me to get a sense of your ideas. So
So economists, they basically take a look at the scarce resources in the society.
Arushi, can you speak up
Yes.
a bit because you're hardly audible?
Am I audible now, sir?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. So I basically think that economists, they study the scarce resources in a society, like
yeah.
if, and then they look at what we can do with those resources and how to allot those resources, not a
Hmm.
society, but like any system or maybe even a firm, etc. Like that.
That's a very good answer. So again, so what Arushi is saying here is essentially what microeconomists do. So I did not expect such a good answer. So the point being that the world has things which people want and which are in short supply. That's it. So let's say diamonds, or let's say even food to a certain extent. So the point being that what people want, there is not enough going around. So if we could satisfy everybody's want with regard to something, then there is no point doing economics. So given that things are scarce, what is the best way to hand out those scarce things to people? So one basic idea is try to hand out the things to people who want it the most. But then another problem arises: how do we know who wants it the most? So this is an idea of efficiency. So given resources are scarce, you should not be wasting those. So that's the essential starting point of economics. That, of course, leads to certain kind of mathematical tools we need to use, specifically tools from optimization. So given that there are things are scarce, I have to do things in an optimal manner. So that's what we focus on, essentially in economics. So what we will do over the next 2 to 3 years is do a lot of optimization. One question which arises in most students' minds when they start doing economics at the undergrad level is, do actually people behave the way we are trying to model them? The answer is kind of mixed. We don't. So that's why economics seems kind of unnatural things to study. Okay. You can think that, okay, I didn't never sat and solved an optimization problem and made a choice like this in my life. So the justification for what economists do flow from the fact that we are essentially doing some kind of optimization at the back of our heads, which we are hardly conscious of. So that's the essential point. But the whole exercise makes a lot of sense. So let's say, why is it that, or let's say your parents say don't waste electricity. Electricity is scarce. So many places in the world they don't have electricity. So ideally, the best way to act is to optimize and use things accordingly. And that's Those are the things we are going to teach you over the next 3 years. Of course, that's not the only thing. That's the theoretical side of it. Yeah, Lavanya, please come up with your question.
So I raised my hand by
Again, you are not audible. There is some problem with this interface.
I raised my hand by mistake.
You don't have any questions.
Sir, I raised my hand by mistake.
I'm sorry, but Lavanya, I just can't hear you. I'm sorry. Is there some problem with your mic?
Professor, she said she raised her hand by mistake.
Oh, okay. Okay, but do keep on asking questions. So that's essentially a part of economics we will be doing. Another part you will get to know more about is empirical economics, which is, okay, these kind of theorizing we do. We sit and theorize, build models to allocate scarce resources in certain sense. That those are theories, but we are not a physical science, right? So theories will be huge in number. Which theories work and which theories don't, that has to be checked. And the check essentially comes from empirical economics. So what empirical economists do is they test these theories, which theorists like me build, and they put that theory to test via data. So that's another side of economics, and both will be complementing each other. Okay? So it's not that you can throw away theory for empirics or throw away empirics for theory. Doesn't work like that. Of course, at the end of the day, 3 years down the line, you may end up specializing in one of these areas. But essentially, both, you need to have a sense of both. Pure specialization in only one kind of leaves you blind in certain sense. So you need to have a general sense, and I hope we will be able to inculcate that in you over the next 3 years. Okay? So that's the basic idea. You can come up with questions if you want at this point. I would love to take general questions. What are the things you expect from this course and things like that before I go onto my specialized topic. So I'll wait for 1-2 minutes for questions to arise, and then I'll move. So it seems none of you have anything to ask. Okay. So as you must have seen that my general the heading or the subject of my topic happens to be playing games. So how many of you have heard or have come across the word game theory? Guys, you have to participate. Okay, so there are 3 hands I can see. 7 hands, so it's going up. You can speak up also. Okay, so let me just give you a very basic sense of where game theory comes from and how is it a bit slightly removed from what normal economists do. Game theory assumes that we are not individuals alone residing in this world. Many of our decisions, the choices we make in our lives, they depend on what other people are doing. So, let's say you make a decision to go and watch a movie. Your decision or the efficacy of your decision will depend, let's say, on how many people are out on the road that day. So you may get stuck in a jam because other people have come out. So it's not that we make all our decisions in isolation. Essentially, we are social creatures. So what other people do, they affect us. Now, given that they affect us, how do we predict things? So that's essentially the core of game theory. Don't confuse this with the normal usage of games, which is, let's say, cricket or football, even though you can apply the tools from game theory there. But games generally mean that we essentially are playing some sort of a game with other people who belong to a social environment. So essentially what they do affects what we do and vice versa. So what we do affects what they do. So that's essentially where game theory comes from. And then we take it from there. So what I'll do here is I'll share the slide with you, slide which I have. Can you guys see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Again, at the cost of repetition, I am going to ask you to ask me questions, because otherwise this discussion is kind of fruitless, because I'm the one who is talking and then I leave within an hour. So ask away. The good thing about asking now is I know that most probably you don't know most of the things. So no question is stupid in this kind of an environment. All questions are valid. So of course, after 3 years, if you come and ask me not that great questions, I may judge you a bit. But at this stage, there is no judgment. So ask away, ask whatever you want. So playing games. So as I said, games talk to social interactions. And is there any way for us to make any predictions, given that each person's decision depends on somebody else? So the starting point, of course, is decision theory. What is decision theory? Just wait. That was what microeconomics used to be for the longest period, for say till 1950s. So that's what it says. What it says is the society is made up of individuals. Individuals do not affect each other. Okay? So they make their own decisions, let's say sitting in a black box. So they're not being affected by whatever is happening outside. So how individual make choices based, of course, on what they want, and some consistent behavioral traits. So that behavioral trait generally you will find when you do economics courses is called rationality. So we are rational in a particular sense. Rationality means we are not inconsistent. Okay? So we are not people like, we are not a person who likes to go out without an umbrella one day and with an umbrella another day. So if we like an umbrella over a no umbrella, we'll keep on liking an umbrella over a no umbrella. So there is some consistency in our wants and in our behaviors. Given that we behave consistently, decision theory studies how individuals make choices. So that was essentially the whole of economics till 1950s, to be honest. So how individuals make decisions given different criteria of rationality. Now, of course, that actually reduced the applicability of economics, because the true thing is that we live in a social world. We live in a world inhabited by other individuals like us. So that was the aim or the goal of what people were trying to do, to develop. So what is game theory? It's called interactive decision theory. Studies this area of game theory, studies how individuals make decisions not in isolation, not in silos, not in their own black boxes, but in an environment where other individuals are making decisions as well. And interactive decision theory is what game theory is all about. So essentially, it's a box of tools to analyze situations where individual decisions depend on the decisions made by other individuals. That's what game theory is. As brief history, as I said, before 1950s, economists used to study individual rational decision makers interacting on a competitive market. So let me ask you here. So how many of you know what competitive markets are? I can't see you, so you guys have to speak up.
So can you please repeat the question?
How many of you have heard of what competitive markets are?
Sir, a competitive market is a market competition
Is a market?
where there is competition, I'm assuming.
True, but this is like this doesn't explain anything. But
So
okay.
are you referring to monopolistic, oligopolistic, those markets?
Yeah. So competitive market. So there has to be a sense of what competition is. So let me try to build a story for you. What competition essentially implies. So let's say there is one good and two people want that good. Essentially, those two people are competing. So competition means there are others like you who want to do the same thing. And let me be honest with you, competition is the truth of life. There is no bigger truth. If you think of, I don't know. So I am in a better position than you to talk about this because I am much older than you. I have faced competition all my life. So let's say entering the IITs, let's say, is an extremely competitive process. But that means that there are things which are essentially scarce, and there are more people wanting. So IIT seats are a scarce resource. So there is competition. So the competitive market is a place where things are scarce, and there are infinite number of individuals wanting those things. An infinite number of individuals is important. What happens is, when there are infinite number of individuals, a particular individual is too small. So a particular individual cannot affect anything as such. So there is no need for me to study how other individuals are affecting my decisions because each individual is too small. Okay? Each individual doesn't essentially matter. So competitive market means that everybody is too small. But if everybody is too small, then nobody affects anybody else's decision. So that's what the framework was till the 1950s. We essentially studied competitive markets. To a certain extent, we started studying monopoly as well. But again, if you think about monopoly a bit, monopoly is a place where there is only one seller of a good. But because there is only one seller, there is again no need to study somebody else's impact on the decision of that monopolist because he is only one. There is nobody else who can affect him. Okay? But in the competitive, it's the other end of the spectrum where there are infinite number of very small individuals. So nobody affects the other. It's like atoms. So one atom hardly affects another. Too small to do. So that was the framework economists were actually using till the 1950s. Not because they had not thought of anything beyond competitive market. They were essentially handicapped because they did not have the tools to study how to make people interact and come up with predictions. So it's more of a handicap rather than a philosophical shortcut. So people knew that different people affect different people, but they did not essentially have the tools to analyze those situations. So the economists were unable to study most questions of interest as individuals did not affect other individuals in their models. Then there came two groups of geniuses. That's all I can say. So the first pair of people were John von Neumann and Oscar Morgenstern in 1944. They were they wrote a book which is called Theory of Games and Economic Behavior. There they first suggested a model which can potentially help us study situations of interactive decision making. By the way, this John von Neumann, guys should just go to Wikipedia and read up on this person. Genius is a sort of understatement for him. He had two PhDs, one in physics and one in math, and he did those simultaneously. So he used to travel between Hungary and France. So on the weekend he would work on math, on the weekdays he would work on physics and things like that. So he was essentially a genius and a sort of father of many different fields. You can check that up on Wikipedia. So his contributions span physics, chemistry, computer science, economics. I don't know what else. So just if you have time to read up on geniuses, read up on John von Neumann. He's considered the sharpest or the brightest mind of the 21st century. So they were these two people who, in pair, they wrote this book called The Theory of Games and Economic Behavior, which gave us the initial model of how to study interactive decision making. Then came along another genius by the name of John Nash. So have you heard of John Nash? Any one of you?
Yes, sir.
So he was another
Yes,
genius.
sir.
So mostly you would have sort of come across John Nash because there was a movie made on him, there was a book written on him. So this guy was a mathematician, of course. He's a schizophrenic. He had a very tough life, but when it came to work, he was a genius. So he was one of so he contributed by suggesting this idea of called the Nash Equilibrium, which I'm coming to what an equilibrium is. And after that, after his contribution, there was actually an explosion of research using game theoretic tools. In fact, there is a famous story where John Nash took his proof or took his idea of equilibrium to John von Neumann to sort of seek feedback. And John von Neumann actually said that this is too trivial and John Nash should not be spending his valuable time on that. But these are, again, this could be rumors, things like that. But these two essential geniuses started the whole field. And then there has been, as I said, an explosion in various directions. I will do a few applications. So these two people, these three people actually, to be honest. So it's my personal belief actually that post this explosion of this innovation of game theory, not much of innovation has happened in the field of economics. Some people say that randomized control trials, which are the in thing at this point of time, which is being done a whole great deal in economics. Abhijit Banerjee got a Nobel Prize for that. But RCT, to be honest, is not an innovation of economics. RCTs used to be done in the medical science field all the time. So it's not exactly an innovation. So what has been done in economics is they have imported methods being used in medical science to study questions. So that essentially is not an innovation, but the application is, of course, something which is laudable, which is nice. The game theoretic innovation, actually, these two people did. So they came up with the methods. There was nothing before them. And after them, there was an explosion in study using game theoretic tools. So that's the idea. So definitely read up on these people. They've had interesting lives. They have had tough lives, but interesting lives at the same time. Okay. So let's do a very non-technical discussion of games, how we describe games. So games involve a set of agents we call the players. It could be an incumbent, monopolist, and some entrant who are playing a game. So whoever. So two people playing a chess. So the players would be the two players. So the human agents who are involved in this interactive situation are called players. This is the first element a game should have. The second element which the game requires you to describe properly is the sets of things agents can do, which are called action sets. Okay, so kind of things. So the action sets essentially in some way define the rules of the game, in the sense that sets of things the agents can do and the order. That's also important that I'm coming to. Order in which players can do things. So the action sets are lists of things agents have access to. So in chess, the action set would be you could move the pawns one square forward or the knights 2.5 squares to the left or right. So things like that. What are the things the agents can do? That's the all those such things are captured in action sets. Okay? So each player in the situation will have an action set. So the sets of players, action set, and finally some measure of what these players are getting out of the game. Yeah? So what is their goal? What is their aim? What do they get? So those are called utility functions. You will be exposed or introduced to the idea of utility functions very soon in micro 1. So you need to have these functions which capture what the agents hope to get as a function, as something which depends on the actions which he himself takes as well as the actions being taken by others. So these three elements together describe a interactive situation. So it's just a description of what the players are, what the players can do, and what do they hope to get out of it. But that's not enough. We have described a game theoretic situation, but then what do we do with that? So you need some thing to predict what is going to happen in that situation. Okay? So finally, to predict what happens in the game, which is separate from the description of the game. The description of the game only includes players, actions, and utility functions. The prediction, for predicting something, we need something we call the equilibrium concept. Okay? So equilibrium, the idea of equilibrium. So can you, some of you suggest what generally is meant by equilibrium?
So a balance.
A balance, yes. A state of rest. A balance is the word. So balance of forces, state of rest. So when you balance forces, things don't move, right? State of rest is also that. So where essentially equilibrium tells you that once all the resultant forces have been taken care of, this is a state of balance. So you need some concept of a state of balance. Okay? So we have the description of the game. We have this notion of an equilibrium which talks about balance. And then we use this equilibrium concept we are armed with to predict what is going to happen in this particular game descriptive situation. So that's it. Description of the game, equilibrium concept. Once we have a description of the game and the equilibrium concept, we can analyze the game using the equilibrium concept. Okay? So the description of a game helps us formalize a strategic situation, and an equilibrium concept helps us predict what will happen in that situation. So that's the idea. So any questions at this point? None?
So I have a question.
Please go ahead.
So is there a formal definition of the word game?
Yes. I did not. So see, okay, it's a very good question. Thank you for asking me, but I assume that you guys are not that used to mathematical symbols here. So that's why I sort of stopped myself from using. Games are mathematical objects. So in mathematics, the essential point is a definition. That's where you start from. Definition is a description. So there is a mathematical way to define or describe a game, which are actually contained in the first 3 points. So what will you have? Set of agents is a set of players. You call it capital N. Set of actions. These are again sets of things which people can do. Utility functions is also a function. It's a mathematical object. I have not used the formal definition in these slides, given that I assume that the talk has to be very minimal and very simple. But these are mathematical objects. You can define a game. You can describe a game. And the equilibrium concept also is a mathematical object. Okay? So you have a mathematical description of things which we call a game, and a mathematical equilibrium concept which helps us analyze them. So it's essentially wholly mathematical. Again, why not? Why wouldn't it be mathematical? It was discovered. It was invented by a mathematician in John von Neumann. Again, are there people in class who were afraid of mathematics? Nobody speaking up? Okay. Can you hear me at least?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
So
sir.
now, rather than going into more sort of mathematical things, talking about that, let's do a few examples to understand what games are and what these equilibrium things are. So the most famous is this game called Prisoner's Dilemma. So I'm using a pen. I hope you can see the markings on the slides. The story goes like this. So Prisoner's Dilemma actually is the most widely used game even till now. What is the story? There are two thieves. Okay, police captured these two thieves, not in the action of thieving itself, but they captured them. The police suspect that they have stolen some things together, but the police doesn't have the evidence to convict them. So what they do is they put the two prisoners in two different rooms and tell them that if they confess, they are going to get a light sentence. Light sentence in the sense 1 year or so. But if one does not confess, while the other friend of his who is in the other room confesses, the one who does not confess will be put behind bars for a long time. So this is the story. So imagine two thieves caught, put in two different rooms, police telling each of them separately that you better confess, because if you don't and the other guy does, you are in for a long haul. You are in for 10 years, let's say. So what this creates, this situation creates is an immediate tension between what is good for the individual, the separate individual, and what is good for them both together. So let's try to formalize this as a particular game. So this is a sort of general description of the game. So how do we model this whole situation we have laid out in the previous slide? So of course, the set of players are the prisoners, prisoner 1, prisoner 2. So that talks to what the set of players. What are the two things we can do? What are the actions they have access to? Prisoner 1 and prisoner 2. They both have the option either to confess or not to confess. So their action set of prisoner 1 will be confess, not confess. Action set of prisoner 2 will be confess, not confess. So we have the players, which are prisoner 1 and prisoner 2, and we have their action set. As we said, we need a utility function over the action set. So now let's follow the story and just try to give some numbers to these combinations. So we say that if both don't confess, then we said to start with that the police doesn't have enough evidence to put them behind bars for a long time. So both, let's say, are put behind bars for 1 year each. So prisoner 2, so prisoner 2, so actually this would be better. Let's put prisoner 1 here and prisoner 2 here. Just wait a bit. Just wait, sorry. Okay, so how do we read this box? Okay. The numbers which are first, they belong to, these are the utility of prisoner 1. The numbers which are second belong to the other utilities of prisoner 2. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's try to understand this situation. If both prisoner 1 and prisoner 2 don't confess, prisoner 1 is sent to jail for 1 year, prisoner 2 is sent to jail for 1 year. If prisoner 1 confesses and prisoner 2 does not confess, then the one who confesses gets scot free. They go to jail for 0 years, while the other player who did not confess goes to jail for 10 years. Similarly for this box, if prisoner 1 does not confess but prisoner 2 ends up confessing, prisoner 1 goes to jail for 10 years and prisoner 2 gets scot-free because he has confessed. Okay. What about the box where both of them have confessed? Now the police have evidence. Okay. So they can put the prisoners behind jail for 5 years each. Okay. So this is a whole description of a game. This is called the prisoner's dilemma game. Is the structure of the game clear to you guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So this is the story. Basic. If you confess and the other doesn't, if you don't confess but the other does, then you are screwed. Then you are in a jail for a long, long time. So you can immediately see that there would be a tendency towards confess. But let us hold our horses here. This is just a description of the game. We don't know how to analyze it. What is the equilibrium concept? I've said that once we have described the game, we need an equilibrium concept to analyze the game. Before I describe the equilibrium concept, what do you guys think is going to happen in this case? Even without knowing what an equilibrium concept is. What should they do, prisoner 1 and 2?
So both should
So
confess.
confess.
Both should confess. But again, that's your initial guess. That's a hunch. So let's try to bring in the formal definition of an equilibrium. So the equilibrium notion we are going to use is called a dominant strategy. What is a dominant strategy? A dominant strategy for a player is a strategy which does not depend on what the other player does. You use that strategy whatever the other player is doing. You don't care about what the other player. So sorry. So this is not. So let us try to figure out what the dominant strategy is. Prisoner 1. So let's take prisoner 1. If prisoner 2 confesses, what should prisoner 1 do? If prisoner 2 confesses, what should prisoner 1 do? So this box. Prisoner 2 is confessing. Should prisoner 1 confess or not confess?
Confess.
Confess.
Confess. So prisoner 2 is confessing, prisoner 1 should confess. Because minus 5 is minus 5 is greater than minus 10. If prisoner 2 does not confess, what should prisoner 1 do?
Confess.
So notice prisoner 1 should confess irrespective of whether prisoner 2 confesses or doesn't confess. Okay? So that means that confess is a dominant strategy for prisoner 1. Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So prisoner 1 should confess irrespective of what prisoner 2 is. Similarly for prisoner 2, let us do the same thing for prisoner 2. If prisoner 1 confesses, what should prisoner 2 do?
Confess.
Confess, because minus 5 is greater than minus 10. If prisoner 1 does not confess, what should prisoner 2 do?
Confess.
Yes.
So again, for prisoner 2 also there is a dominant strategy to confess. So you should always play dominant strategies. Okay? So both players should confess because confess is a dominant strategy for both players. And when you use the dominant strategy, what comes out is called the dominant strategy. The dominant strategy equilibrium actually is this. So the notion of equilibrium we are using is dominant strategy. Now, notice in the dominant strategy equilibrium, both prisoner 1 and 2 get minus 5 and minus. Is that the best for them?
No, sir.
No, sir. No, sir.
This happens to be the best, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So basically, they cannot achieve the best. So essentially, this is a societal dilemma. This is a problem of trust. Because you could not trust your partner to not confess, you chose to confess yourself. So this is a failure of the social best, okay? So the prisoner's dilemma has a dominant strategy equilibrium CC. Many examples of prisoner's dilemma in the real world captures the tension between what is selfishly good or individually good and what is socially good. Let us take an example of a prisoner's dilemma. Let's say there is a public park which is very close to your house. Now, everybody in your community, a small community, has access to that park. But the park is good if it is clean. Now, my question is, who cleans the park? Cleaning the park is costly. So who will clean the park?
No one.
No one will clean the park because it's costly. What you will try to do is make the other person clean the park and you yourself use it, right? So what happens in the end is nobody cleans it. So essentially, both this confess can be used by nobody cleaning the park. So what you end up with is an unclean park, which is not good for anyone. It's because you individually try to save the cost of cleaning the park. Everybody is thinking the same way, and at the end, nobody ends up cleaning it. So that's an example of prisoner's dilemma. Prisoner's dilemma is everywhere. Wherever individual motives or incentives are in clash with what is socially good, you have a prisoner's dilemma. And the outcome you can see is quite bad. Outcome is bad for society. But that is what is going to happen. Any questions at this point? No questions. I'm going very fast, so I guess you must have questions. Anyway, so prisoner's dilemma is not the only game which can be there. So there is another game which is very famous. It's called the Battle of Sexes game. What is the story behind that? Story goes like this. Husband and wife have a holiday, have a free day to do something together. They want to spend it together. So there is an agreement that they want to spend the time together. But they disagree on what they should do together. Specifically, the wife wants to watch a movie along with her husband. So both of them watch a movie together. The husband, on the other hand, wants to watch a boxing match together with his wife. So there is an agreement that they should spend the time together, but there is a disagreement on what exact activity they are going to do together. This is also a game. Players are husband-wife. Action sets, as you can, let's say, movie and boxing. And utilities are here. So let's try to understand it. If both of them, so the agreements are here. What is the agreement? That we want to spend the time together. So if the wife is watching a movie while husband is watching a boxing match, both of them get no utility. Both of them get zero. So this 0-0 box is an agreement between them that we want to do the thing together. The disagreement is captured here. If both wife and husband watch a movie, the wife gets 2, husband gets 1. If the both husband and wife both watch boxing, then the wife gets 1, the husband gets 2. So is the idea clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
So
sir.
now this is also a game. Everything is specified. The question is, how do we predict anything in this? Question, first, you should immediately go, is there a dominant strategy? Let's try to look at a dominant strategy. Again, these are just, the examples I'm doing are just placeholder. These are just examples. Huh? You can formalize any interactive decision situation as a game. Okay? These are famous examples, therefore I am using them for the purposes of this talk. That's it. Okay, let's try to check for dominant strategy. So, of course, we need an equilibrium concept. Let's try to use the dominant strategy. Okay, if the husband watches movies, what should the wife do? Husband watches movies, what should the wife do?
Watch the movie.
Watch a movie.
If the husband watches boxing, what should the wife do?
Watch the boxing.
Watch the boxing. So, does the wife have a dominant strategy?
No, sir.
No.
No,
Does
sir.
No, sir.
his wife's strategy depends on what the husband does. So doesn't have a dominant strategy. Similarly, you can check for the husband also doesn't have a dominant strategy. So now, given that the players do not have a dominant strategy, how do we predict anything in this case? This is where Nash came. This is where John Nash came. He resolved this tension of the non-existence of a dominant strategy equilibrium by proposing what is called a Nash equilibrium. So that's his major contribution. After this paper, which I think was written in 1951, there was an explosion in the research in economics using the concept of Nash equilibrium. Before that, we did not have any equilibrium concept beyond dominant strategy. Nash equilibrium, what it says is that it's again the idea of balance, which one of your classmates suggested. Nash equilibrium says that a player should not shift from his strategy given what the other player is doing. So let's try to understand what it is. So in this game, Nash equilibrium predicts that either we will have movie or boxing. So in our game, Nash equilibrium concept just rules out, just rules these two out. So what does the Nash equilibrium say? So let us try to understand. If the husband watches a movie, the wife should watch a movie, we saw. Now, if the wife watches a movie on the other hand, what should the husband do? If the wife watches a movie, what should
Watch
the
a
husband
movie.
do?
Watch a movie.
If the husband watches a movie, then what should the wife do?
Watch a movie.
You create this steady, non-changing sequence. If the wife watches a movie, husband movie, and so on. So this is a Nash equilibrium. Given that the husband is watching a movie, the wife should not change her strategy of watching a movie. And similarly for the husband. So this is a state of rest. Given what the other player is doing, you don't change your strategy. Similarly, you can check for boxing. If the husband watches boxing, the wife should watch boxing. If the wife watches boxing on the other hand,
Then the husband should also watch
what should
boxing.
the husband do?
Watch the boxing match.
Watch the boxing.
So you see, this B, this is also a state of rest. This is also another Nash. So what it helped us, even though dominant strategies don't exist in this example, Nash equilibrium helps us make a prediction. But you can see the prediction is not that crisp or stark. It just says that either you will have movie or you will have boxing. These are generally called coordination games. Coordination games have multiple equilibrium. In this case, you have two equilibrium. In fact, there are more equilibrium than this. So there are others which I will not talk about. So the form of those equilibrium is watch a movie with probability half, both of them using strategies like that. But let's not complicate those decisions. For our purposes, both movie and boxing are a Nash equilibrium. So this points us to the fact that even if there are no dominant strategies, you can have an equilibrium prediction using the concept of Nash equilibrium. So these are two very famous games. But the whole point of the discussing this whole discussion we had is that you can build interactive situations up as games and then use different equilibrium concepts to predict what is going to happen in such a situation. Okay. Application. Let's do one application. And this story is very simple. It's actually an application of the prisoner's dilemma game. So there are two forms. They sell something. Doesn't matter. They compete on the product market. They set the prices for their goods. Okay, before I go to this application, any questions at this point?
Sir, I had one question.
Please go ahead.
Sir, I am a bit confused between Nash equilibrium and the dominant strategy.
So dominant strategy equilibrium, what is the exact confusion? Can you tell me?
So actually, I'm not able to spot the difference. Like even in Nash equilibrium, when the
That's a
husband
very good thing. Dominant
Yes.
strategy. So let me just put it. A dominant strategy is always a Nash equilibrium. So dominant strategy equilibrium is a subset of Nash equilibrium. Let's say this is a Nash equilibrium set of all Nash equilibrium. Dominant strategy equilibrium will be a subset of that. Okay.
Okay,
Point
okay,
is,
sir.
when there does not exist a dominant strategy equilibrium, can we predict something? Then we have to. So let's say this is the set of dominant strategy. The Nash equilibrium set is bigger. When there doesn't exist dominant strategies, how do we predict? So then we use Nash equilibrium.
Okay, sir.
So,
Got it.
can you got it?
Yes, sir. Now I'm clear.
Yeah. So dominant strategy, see, the idea of dominant strategy is the first thing you should look for. Okay, does a player have a strategy which he can apply irrespective of what the other players in their environment are doing? Is there anything like that? If there is not anything like that, still we should be able to make certain predictions, right? For that, we build or generalize the concept to Nash equilibrium. So is it clear now?
Yes, sir.
So again, all these things will become even clearer when you do a full course on game theory. So let's try to do one application from the general world you must have seen or must have come across. So there are many firms who supply same products in the economy. So what they do is they set the prices for the goods they are producing and which people want to buy. What is the game? The game is customers buy the goods from the firm which charges a lower price. Do you find this problematic, this assumption? That you always want to buy a good from firms which sell it at a lower price? Are you guys there?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So you want to always buy from the cheaper seller? Is that a problematic assumption you feel? Okay, I assume that you don't feel that it's a problem. If the firm end up setting same prices, then half of the customers buy from each firm. So this is the rule. We can set up this interaction as a game. The set of players are the firms. The set of actions are the prices they want to set. And what the firm get as a result in terms of profit is the utility of the firm. Of course, the profit depends not only on the prices it quotes, but also the prices of the other firms, right? So if let's say I quote a price of 10 and the other firm quotes a price of 8, what will be my profit?
2.
No. For other firm charges a price of 8 and I charge a price of 10. Nobody will buy from me, my profit will be 0. Right? Everybody will buy from the person who is selling it cheaper, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You follow? Okay. So people want to buy from the cheaper sellers. That's it. Now, we can set up this interaction as a game where the players are the firms. The set of actions are the prices they can set for their good. And the utilities are the profits. Now, we can use the concept. Again, this is a very informal discussion. There is a mathematical way of doing it. We can use the concept of Nash equilibrium to make a prediction of how the interaction will proceed. The Nash equilibrium in this particular example says that both firms will charge a price which just covers their cost so that both firms make 0 profits. This is a situation which is called price wars. Okay? So what happens? Because the cheaper guy will get all the customers, everybody wants to undercut the other. They keep on undercutting each other to the point where none of them are making any profits. Examples from the real world, airline industries. So that you will often hear that airlines are generally running on losses. But why should they run on losses? Essentially, because the airlines provide the same product, which is, let's say, a flight from Bombay to Calcutta. That is being provided by both Jet as well as Indigo. The same product. Now, if you have to lure the customer or attract the customer, you have to charge a lower price than, let's say, Jet has to charge a lower price than Indigo. But Indigo knows that. So Indigo wants to undercut Jet. The Jet again wants to undercut Indigo. This process continues till the point where the prices are so low that the airlines don't make any profit. So that's the Nash equilibrium prediction of price competition and prices. So price wars are something you'll always, if you pay enough attention to the news, you will see that there are these kind of price wars going on between many different companies which essentially sell the same product. You have to sell the same product. So these kind of price competition doesn't take place between, let's say, Coca-Cola and let's say Sprite. because the products they are offering, Coca-Cola is not Sprite. Coca-Cola is a bit different from Sprite, right? So it's essentially not the same product. So that's the idea. So you can set this situation up as a game and predict that both the firms will make a profit of zero. Okay? So this is one example, a very common example from real life. But generally, you can set up any situation where there are more than one person interacting and set it up as a game and use a particular equilibrium concept to make a prediction. So that's what game theory is about. So this is good. These kind of interactive decisions will play a large part in your next 3 years. So, and this is very interesting also. So I don't think you will not enjoy it. I think you will enjoy it. So that's that from my side. I will use the remaining how many, I don't know how much, 5 minutes to take questions from you. The questions could be general. The questions could be specific to the lecture I've taken. So whatever you want to ask, please go ahead.
So I have a question.
Please.
So in the example you just mentioned before about the airlines, so that I assume that would happen only in a perfect competition market, or not in an oligopoly.
No,
Or
where is perfect competition here? So that's a very good question you bring up. Perfect competition, if you remember the start of the lecture, I said infinite number of sellers. Here there are only 2 sellers. The problem is when you compete on prices instead of quantities, it essentially, even a 2-player situation is like perfect competition. Okay. Here there are only 2 sellers, Indigo and Jet. How is it perfect? Both players are big. Both players are big enough. But the fact that they're setting prices instead of setting quantities leads to the results to be the same as perfect competition. That's the essential. So again, all these things, the details of all these things will be done in your micro course. So these are very interesting. Price wars always go on. Any?
Sir, I have a question.
Please.
So, sir, here are we considering the qualities of each product to be the same?
Yes. So if you have product differentiation, this result will not go through.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
So essentially, that's why airlines at the end of the day, the product is a flight from Bombay to Delhi. Of course, some airlines provide food on flight. So that makes that flight slightly different from the other flight and things like that. But essentially, the product is a flight from Bombay to Delhi. The same product, which Jet is providing, which Indigo is providing, and which any other airline is providing. How do you change? How do you differentiate on the product where the product essentially is a flight from Bombay to Delhi? So there is a lot of price war which goes on between airline companies. Okay?
so shouldn't we also factor in like individual customer biases and heuristics? Like they could prefer it. Okay.
Definitely. But now let's say, so you are actually trying to counter the assumption where I said you always buy from the cheaper airlines. Many people may not. Many people may be willing to fly Indigo even though Indigo is charging a bit more than Jet, because their past experiences with Indigo has been better. Yeah? That could be the case. But here what we did is a very simple model. Okay, Lavanya, please go on.
So it means that goodwill also counts in this situation.
I cannot hear you. There is some problem with your mic, Lavanya.
Can anybody else hear me?
Yeah. If somebody
Yeah,
else can hear
sir.
me,
She's
can you
asking
convey
if
the
goodwill
message?
plays the role here.
Goodwill. See, generally, Lavanya, the kind of things we are going to teach you, not goodwill, concepts like goodwill, love, trust, they don't have nothing to do with this. It's pure selfish behavior. Again, the question then arises is, does goodwill, trust, love, things like those exist in the real world? Of course they do. Economics will provide you a particular selfish lens on society. So if you want to model goodwill, then economics is not something you should use. Even though recently we have tried to model trust and things like that, but those are very recent. Any more questions?
So one
Yeah.
question.
Please
Wouldn't
go ahead.
you agree that, like in the example you mentioned, it would be better off for both the parties to collaborate and like
Yes,
cooperate and
yes,
decide on a price?
yes. So that is called cartelization, form a cartel. So there are issues with that. You are way ahead of the curve, it seems. There are issues with that, which we will do when we do game theory. So let's skip that now. Of course, they should collaborate. They should collude is the word. They should collude and charge high prices. But there are antitrust movements. Do you know about antitrust? Antitrust is government's way to stop collusion amongst companies. So there are antitrust cases and things like that, which essentially tries to break this sort of collusion. Ideally, the model I built in, these two firms should collude and set a common price. But that's for now way beyond the simple models I've done to you now. You will learn these three things over the next 3 years. So I understand the answer is not satisfactory, but let's leave some things for the future. Anyone else? Okay, so it was actually nice interacting with you guys. So your courses will start on the 2nd of August, I guess. So all the best and hope to see you on campus whenever it reopens.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All the best. Study
Thank you, sir.
hard. Yeah. And
Yes, sir.
yeah.
Thank
Bye
you,
bye.
sir.
Thank you, sir.